Welcome to the Special Education Technology Center podcast, Awe and Wonder. We're so excited today. We have Dan Herlihy, who has more tips and tricks about assistive technology than you know what to do with. We'll let him introduce himself in a minute. I'm Sarah Kinsella.
And I'm Brenda Del Monte. Dan, why don't you tell the very few people who may not have heard of you before, who you are and what you do?
Good morning. I've been out of the field for a little bit, so I'm sure there's quite a few who don't know who I am at this point. But my name's Dan Herlihy, and excuse me. I probably characterize myself as an assistive technology resource specialist, and so what that means what that means is I kind of play in everything. I play with the hardware, I play with the software, but for the most part, I think I'm connecting the dots between them all. I'm basically always looking for solutions. So I look at what's out there and what the needs are, and I try to bridge them and bring them all together for solutions for teachers, solutions for students.
Love it. And you have so many solutions. I remember seeing you at Closing the Gap my first time going. And, at that point, you go to a conference and you're like, what is this going to be about? Am I going to really find good information? How's this going to work when I come back home? And I ended up with pages of notes and something I loved from your session, Dan. And something else I loved about it was at the bottom of the page was your email. And it was like, what is this about? What do I do with this? Is he really saying I can contact him?
Yeah. That was one of the big things I always try to make a point of at the end of all my workshops, whether it was at a conference or at a school district or even someone just connecting with me is, here's my email. When you run into a problem, and you will, because if we always try to push things out there and try to, extend where things are at the moment, you're going to eventually run into a wall. You're going to run into, wait a minute, it worked in the session. How come it's not working now? Mm-hmm. And I want people to know that there's someone out there that you can just contact, and I'll help you. And when you put that out there, they tend to try things, and when they hit a wall, they go, instead of walking away, they tend to, let's just call Dan. And then they will, get an email or a phone call or something. And this is what we've done. And here's where we've run into a problem. And I might sit there and go, oh, did you remember to do this? And it becomes that, and all of a sudden it's like click, and you never hear from them again because that was the solution to what they needed, which was good because now they're off and running again. And when people know that there's someone there for them, I think it makes a real big difference. I think it's like that with the kids we work with too, with that knowing that someone's going to be there day in and day out. And whenever there's a problem, they're there to help us. I think it makes a big difference in the confidence you have in giving it a shot. And sometimes it's just the impetus to, okay, here we go, let's give it a try. And they actually do it instead of kind of like, it looked easy in the session, but now I'm not so sure.
I know. Right. This exact thing happened. I was at ATIA and I went to Dan and Mo, and by Mo, I mean Mo Booty, who's also in this series. But Dan and Mo was a class where just like, it was rapid fire. You're going to get a whole bunch of ideas, and you got, for those that are ready to get an idea and run with it and, insert your own creativity, go for it. And it was green screen. It was the one where you were talking about, hey, you can put a green screen behind, and you can take videos of your kids and then put them in different environments, maybe that you can't actually recreate. And it was like, next, right? So then we are at the bar or beverage counter, whatever we want to call it on this podcast later that night. And you were just so approachable. And we were like, okay, we need more information. Exactly how are we doing this? Literally, we are against a wall at the bar. You're like, so if everything's clean in the back, you can put a green screen. And then we're like, you went into a little bit more detail. We went back and we made videos of all of our kids doing their favorite things. I remember this one little kid, his favorite show was the Bubble Guppies. And so we green screened the Bubble Guppies like theme song. And he was one of the little Bubble Guppies floating around on the theme song. And they still show it I mean, they still show it to friends. They still post it on the Facebook remember thing. But I mean, we had younger kids for that and older kids for other things. And what I'm thinking is, I feel like many of you leaders and change makers don't know the impact, because I know that we didn't end up emailing you when we were done. Like, this was the most amazing project and look at all our videos. So I want to thank you on behalf of all the people who left and did amazing things and never told you about it.
Oh, thanks. Because, I think that's actually for me anyway, that was always my goal of inspiring you what are you going to do with this? Kind of like you're sitting here today and you're learning how to do this. What are you going to do on Monday with the kids? And it's always going to be individual, and it's going to be different depending on who you work with, because I would always say, here's the handouts. Here's how you do it. This is the mechanics, kind of like that bottom of Bloom's taxonomy. Here's the knowledge base. We click on here, we do this. Okay, that's all well and good, but what are you going to do with it? And everybody works in a different environment. And that's why we're just throwing out all these ideas really just to stimulate. I never thought of that. I never thought of that type of, thing. And to get people to go back, I think it's to get people to go back and do things they never thought they could. Because a lot of times, we take a session and we tend to look at, this is what you do. Here's the handout. This is what they did. And you try to go back and replicate it. And my whole goal wasn't, you don't have to go back and replicate what I did. Look, this is just how to do it. What are you going to do with it? And take your ideas and run with it. What do the kids want to do with this kind of stuff? That's really the key. And it's just kind of
well, and if they are the ones coming up with the idea and their creativity is required, then they're engaged in making it happen. And learning the technology is just a byproduct of their idea, not the goal, right?
Right. And the irony is that's always going to change. It's going to change today. It's going to change tomorrow. I remember sitting there and, doing a session one time, someone raises a hand and said, are you going to talk about this today? And I'll go, and I remember saying, when did that come out? She goes, well, I just found it yesterday when I was sitting in the hotel room, and I think the app was just released or something. Like, I try to stay current, but
I know.
But
night's notice.
That's the reality. The reality is, let me give you a little background of where I started. My first piece of technology was a used Apple IIe computer. And so with no sound.
There's a theme.
There is a theme.
Not to date myself, but I know I just did. But, but the thing is, then I put a sound card in it. And it's like, ooh, and then, and we kind of built from there. So you can imagine what every day and every year was like back then. And it's just, new things come out. Oh, look, a Mac comes out. Oh, a color Macintosh. Oh, look what we can do now. Oh, a digital camera. I mean, it really never ends. And so it's really understanding the concepts, which is what I always try to get across,
Right.
Tomorrow it's going to be different. The web browser is going to look different. The application is going to have updates. Here's the core things you need to know. And tomorrow you won't need me, instead of like, here's the step by step. And then all of a sudden there's an update to what the application or the browser. And it's like, it doesn't look the same. What do I do now? It's like, well, what did we look for? We were looking, we're going to this menu, or are we looking here? Well, it's not there. Well, I see one more menu. Let's go and explore, kind of
the problem solving piece of it. Right.
Yeah, I guess it's that lifelong learning type of that you want to instill in people, that this is always going to change. We never get to a point where, okay, I've learned it all and now I'm ready to go out. It's like, really.
Yeah.
I had someone in a workshop one time come up to me and said, you give wonderful handouts and the ideas you have are great. And I've taken like all your sessions. She goes, I have a question for you, though. She goes, you always tell us, take the handouts and share them and stuff. She goes, there's not too many sessions left that I have to take that I see you offering. She goes, aren't you afraid that pretty soon we're not going to need you anymore? Because kind of like we learned everything we could. And I kind of laughed and I said, what do you think I'm doing between the time that you're learning what I'm teaching and the next session, like the next year? And she was like, what do you mean? I said, well, you're here. You learned everything I was teaching this year. What do you think I'm going to be doing between now and next year? And she was like, oh, that's why we see you year after year. And I said, what am I doing year after year? It's like, you always have something new. I said, you got to here and I'm gone to here. Once you catch up, guess where I'm going? So I said, it's that
Right.
lifelong learning process. And I said, it applies to me too. And so
Yeah.
that's how it works. And that's
That,
what keeps us engaged. And that's why it's exciting because, think about it. We've gone from printing board maker on paper to using tablets, and it's interactive. It's like, yeah, back then we were just thrilled with what we could do back then. And so we weren't sitting there going, well, we're not going to do anything until this happens, until kind of like, what are you waiting for? Because if you have that mentality, the kids are always waiting. They're always waiting for us to bring it to them.
right.
We go home at the end of the day. What's happening? They're waiting for us to come back tomorrow and take the next steps with them.
Right.
And so, we want to bring everything we can to them today because just like that example with the teacher, tomorrow I'm going to learn new things and we're going to bring it back to the kids and, hey, guess what? Now we have an iPad. Let's check out what this does. And so it's continuous, and it's continuous improvements, and it's continuous growth. And for me, it was always, you're never going to run out of ideas because possibilities will never end. With new things come out. I remember sitting one day, usually in the winter, I'd be designing new workshops when it was kind of quiet. And I'm looking over at my shelf, Santa's Toyland, so to speak. You can imagine all the devices I had and all the, toys I had. And I was thinking about students, what teachers need is for the student to independently walk up with, oh, here's a quiz I have to take, and put the paper down and have it read aloud to them, and not scan it, not process it, not bringing it to here. It's like, that doesn't work. And I'm kind of looking at all these things, and all of a sudden it's like connecting the dots. Wait a minute, with this device and this piece of software and this setting, all the student has to do is put the paper under and click read, because it's taking, for example, a screen reading piece of software, which will read what's on your computer screen, not what's scanned, what it sees. So like if I held up a piece of paper, here, read this right now, just stick it under there. I don't want to scan it, and so put it under a document camera and use programs like Snap and Read or things like that, and just like click read. Not save, nothing. Turn the page, click read. When I'm done,
it easy, right?
Student takes the paper, walks away, and hands it in like everybody else. It's like, and it was like 2 or 3 pieces of this company's hardware, this company's software, this platform, and bringing the pieces together. And so it's kind of like the possibilities, and that kind of gets into what I spent most of my time doing is, what's the need? What does the student need, or what does the teacher need? The teacher needs something that the student independently can go up and take a test, for example. The student needs something that they can independently access, and so what is it they want to do? They want to listen to iTunes. Okay, so I created an overlay for the IntelliKeys keyboard so the student can go to the next song and choose a song, or, those kinds of things, because that's what they want to do in free time. And then what does a teacher need? Teacher needs some interactive, access to math. And so now I'm looking at that. And so it's kind of bridging the possibilities and the needs,
I like that, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, what do the kids want? They want to be like everybody else. And so,
and they want it to be quick, right? We don't need to spend all this time. Like you were saying, let's make this work. So I'm thinking about some of these guiding principles that you're saying, that regardless of advancements in technology, regardless of when you started, what it is now, what it will be in the future, the lifelong learner, and looking at student needs, looking at teacher needs, or whoever you're helping. What are some other guiding principles that you think have stayed or will continue?
It's kind of like having a growth mindset. we want to instill in the kids, because I want the student, I want to be the Pied Piper. I want those kids to follow me anywhere and believe they can, and
Hmm.
that was always my goal. It's like, and when they believe, they're like, all right, well, Mr. Herlihy, and so you want them
Yeah,
to believe where I'm going to take you, you're going to be able to, accomplish or do it. And so it starts with us. It starts with us believing with the kids. Brenda, you have the best phrase of all, presumed competence. We start with the idea that yes, they can. And when we work from there, what the irony is? They rise to the occasion. And if you start with a fixed mindset of no, they can't, guess what? That's where they're going to stay. And
hmm,
so, it's that whole believing in yourself and believing in the kid, and look what you can do. Because if you sit there with a fixed mindset, it's like wheels on the bus all day long, because everything is they can't,
right,
they can't, they can't, versus
right,
actually we're here to enable them to be able to do it.
right.
No,
That's like
that
reminds
is
me of Brenda's book that she wrote. I see you in there, and the yeah buts, or the, except they can't do this, and how you'll say, except that this is where they're at, and what are we going to do?
Yeah. Where they are is not where they're going. Where they are
Right.
is just the starting point. And I think a
Right.
lot of people forget that, whatever they can do right now, don't look at they can't do that. That's where we're going.
Hmm.
We got a few steps to get there, but don't worry about it.
Hmm.
That's the journey, and
And
so
if the listener has, if you guys are on your, listen to more in this series, I don't think there's been a single person who hasn't talked about presumed competency or presumed
Potential.
potential. And then
Hmm.
the other is so many talk about what are they today and where are we headed? Where are we going? You got to know where you're going. You got to know what tomorrow, and tomorrow's not necessarily actually tomorrow, but tomorrow means in the future, where do we want this kid? And I think that is that growth mindset you're talking about. And that's been pretty consistent among new leaders and change makers. And as we see these themes, I think it challenges the rest of us to go, where am I stuck? Where am I actually fixed? And can I shake that snow globe a little bit? You know?
yeah. Yeah, it
Dan,
reminds me of a workshop I used to do at Closing the Gap called Shaking Up Your Snow Globe. And every year it was kind of like,
Oh, really?
cool little, here's new technology out, and this is what you think it does. But guess what? Watch what I'm going to do with it. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, that kind of, kind of like just when you thought things were the way they look, and here's a new idea, or here's something
Right.
different that we can do with it.
that's a fun idea. So, Brenda, you just came up with the class title, and Dan said, "Yeah, I did that title." Shaking up the snow globe. I mean, the class is in your future.
Uh,
Um, Dan, you mentioned coming back to the student and the student's needs. Is there a particular student in your career who inspired you to do more, or kind of your why?
um, I think I can think of a couple examples along the way, and I think they're the ones that just when you're sitting there going like, oh God, it's like, is
Hmm.
it time for me to move on or something, And so I had one parent, here's an example. I had a parent, contact me who knew me, who had taken a lot of my sessions, and said, Dan, my child has to take the state test, and it needs to use the switch to access it, needs to read aloud, and kind of went through the list of, here's the setup. And it was a little involved. It had to be able to read through all the choices without selecting them. Read the choice. If I don't want it, let it go to the next one. Read, if I want it, maybe I haven't decided yet. Let's go through it again. And
Hmm.
then you can let me make the choice and then move to the next question, and all kinds of things. So she said, we got the software we're going to use. And I called the company and I said, my daughter needs to use your software, but she needs to use the switch to take the test. And they were like, oh, you can't. The software, it's not switch accessible.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, but
so she contacts me and says, I know what you say, Dan. Never say never, and that really we can do anything. So she tells me the story, what the needs are, and I go, Oh yeah, actually, they make the software and they're actually selling the hardware. It's like what? It's like, yeah, they're selling the switch too. It's just that one salesman doesn't know what the other side of the company's doing, kind of
Oh,
thing.
wow.
And so again, I won't mention the company, but it's like they sold the software that the state was using even for accommodations. And the company was also selling the switch that I was going to use to adapt it. And so it was one of the so tell her what to do. She goes and creates the setups and everything. Uh, I get back. She gets back to me later, like, oh God, Dan, my daughter took the test. Everything was great. She did really well, and blah blah blah.
Mm.
And so it's kind of like made a difference that day. And, it's kind of
Yeah.
like that star thrower story. Like made a difference, and you forget that on a daily basis we make a difference, but you don't really see it all that often.
Oh, I like
You
that.
know, I
Hmm.
had one. I was working in the computer lab, and I have a teacher come down and go, "What are you doing with one of their students? I won't mention names. And what are you doing with so and so?" I'm like, "Uh oh, I'm like, oh, what do you mean?" She goes, "Well, from what I hear, he comes to the computer lab and he's really good and he's attentive and he does his work and he keeps his hands off other kids and all that kind of stuff." I go, yeah, I'm thinking like I'm not seeing a problem here yet.
Right.
Because, well, he comes down to the classroom and he's sitting there and he's on the computer and his hands are over here and he's distracting this kid, and then he's reaching over and just, hitting the computer of the other kid next to him. And I'm like, oh, I said, well, why don't you come and watch today? So I always made the kids line up at the door before they came in. They had to be quiet. And,
Hmm.
and of course, teachers laugh and go, "Oh, I'm sure they were playing out in the hallway." I go, "Oh no, you'd hear kids, shh, shh, he won't let us in," because they wanted to come in. And so
Hmm.
I go, "Okay, go take your place." He goes over and sits down, and he starts. I had software already loaded up for me. He starts working on something, and then he leans over to the other computer next to him, and he starts to do something. And the teacher goes, "Take your hands off that. What are you doing?" I said, "Oh no, that's his computer." And she said, "Well, what's this one here?" I said, "Well, that's his computer too." I'm like,
Mm.
she's like, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, I sat and watched them the first week or so, and I realized the computer was too slow for him. This is back in the Apple IIe days,
Yeah.
waiting for the next thing to come up. And I realized the computer was too slow for him, that he was kind of like, couldn't wait. So I put him on two computers. And I had a reading program on one computer and math on the other. And he would
Huh.
do it. And then he would come over to here and do the next thing on here. And then he'd come back to this one, and the next problem or whatever was ready for him to go again, and all day long. And it was just a matter of
What a
they
good
were
idea.
he just needed more engagement. And
Yeah. And
so
and that's not about the technology. That is the learning strategy, right? That you picked up. Yeah.
it's really it once again, it's about the student's needs and what does
Hmm.
that student need. And it's just observing, instead of, no, don't do that. Well,
Right.
why are they doing that? And so you kind of, once again, you realize, of course, then she comes down like a month or two later, and, and it's like now what are you doing with him? I'm like, oh no, now why? It's like, well, I tested him and he had like, 7 months of vocabulary gain in the last month and a half. Now I want to know what program you're using with him. So that's kind of
Wow.
like, oh,
You know
so
what
So,
I love about that story, Dan, is that you didn't say, you know what, the computers are too slow and his patience is not sufficient. We're
uh,
gonna wait. Maybe the next iOS update, maybe the next update, maybe, we're at the infancy at this point. Give it a year. I bet you the computers are going to run faster. Think about all that he would have lost in that. And I think that's sometimes what we do. We say, well, I think we're going to wait. And another leader and change maker in the series was saying that too. I think we're going to wait till we refine access before we. And she's like, the kid's 36 years old now and doesn't have great access. If we're waiting for perfection, we're missing all that learning opportunity. It's not pretty. I get that we want it to be prettier. Let's just lay that out. It's not going to be pretty, but he is think about the amount of potential you presumed that he could go from reading to math and, would shift gears. And then you know what he also is? He's not messing with anyone else because he's too busy. And that
Right.
works for all kids. Keep them busy and they won't mess with everybody else. So it's like, what do we know about all kids? How do we apply it? And we're not waiting for technology to catch up to the kid. We're making it happen.
And that kind of goes back to what I said earlier about at the end of the day, we go home and we have a life. And these kids are now on pause, so to speak. They're waiting for what are we going to do with them the next day to bring them, the next step,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like, they have a right to have a life like we do, and so our
Mm-hmm.
job isn't to, I don't feel like doing anything today, it's too hard. When wait do we get a device, or wait, like
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who are waiting. We're not waiting for
Right.
anything. They're the ones who are
Mm-hmm.
waiting, and so
Right.
Right.
and like you said, it's always changing and it's always evolving. Um, and what if we didn't have computers? What do you think? What would be doing then? I'd be looking,
Mm-hmm.
going, well, he needs to be more engaged. So we're going to have two activities. He's going to start to do this, and while the paint's drying, he's going to move over to here or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it takes, because it's about how he thinks and what he needs for stimulation
Mm-hmm.
and what we need. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and like you said, how often is it? Oh, it's not good enough. Well, not good enough for you, but it's
Mm-hmm.
what they need,
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that was part of what I would always look at. I look at it from really two perspectives, and this is the way I always looked at technology. It's like, say the two of you, say Sarah's the student and Brenda, you're the teacher. I'm looking at it from, Sarah's perspective of what does she need? She needs something that she can operate independently. She can make her own choices. Brenda,
Mm-hmm.
what do you need? You need something that I don't have to spend all this time getting her set
Mm-hmm.
up and fixed to work and blah blah blah. I want to be teaching. I don't want to spend my time on getting, getting things ready and I want independence. I want 10 kids and go, okay, kind of like, let's open up our books, and Sarah's hitting a switch and it's opening up in iBooks and it's going to the next page when she hits the switch again. And someone else opens up their book and I've got some sentence strips in it, for them to start reading with or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. But
Right.
independence, and it needs to work for you. And if it's going to take too long, you're not going to do it.
Right.
And if it's going to take too long, Sarah's not going to do it either because she's just waiting and waiting, going like, all right, I give up here kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's that really kind of thinking it out. There were things I wouldn't show because I'd go, it's not ready yet. This is going to take too much, too hard. And I played around a lot with, like text to speech with that whole, I need the student to be able to take something, point and read, not click, process, do
Mm-hmm.
this, and then read. Literally just point at it and read it. Point this, turn a page, point again, read it. I don't want to have to go like, oh no, he has to go pinch and zoom and do. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's not realistic. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
do it. I'd be like, oh God, forget this.
Right.
And so it's kind of IDEO is really big on this. It's a company that their whole thing is design thinking. It's kind of looking at here's what we have. Is there a better way to do it? Is there a better way to design it? Is there a better way to make it work? And
Based
so
on what we already have.
yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's
Okay.
just adding one little thing. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, this is the process I can do over and over again. Uh,
Right.
so
Interesting. So, Dan, you've given us a lot to think about. You obviously have a passion for assistive technology, but also for the students in the field, or the students that you work with, the the teachers, the families. I love that your student focused story was about a family, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of guiding principles. What advice do you have for us, for people who want to move that field forward and continue doing what you have done and others have done so well?
um, I think it's I know this is going to sound simplistic, but it's kind of looking at the needs of the students. What is it we want them to do? What are the goals and objectives as opposed to maintenance or this is what we're doing today? It's like why are we doing this today? What is the goal? Is the goal self-selected reading and raise the reading level? Is the goal access to content? Is it access to curriculum? What is it we're looking at? And I think as teachers, one of the things we need to do is be flexible. And I'll give you an example of, we're always looking at things need to be perfect before we do it type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you probably don't know about me is when I was younger, I used to be very big into outdoor education. And
Hmm.
so I was at an outdoor ed conference, and the main speaker didn't show up, and they came to me and said, Dan, can you do something on, and I'll talk about later. And so I'm like, oh, I wasn't very far away where I was living. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to run home and grab stuff and I'll do it. I got into an car
Oh.
accident. So the next day, I'm supposed to teach cross country skiing, an all afternoon session, hands on, and it's for um, ski for outdoor ed centers and places like that. And it
Mm-hmm.
was all how to teach it. So it's like you're going to have people come. Where do we start? How do we set up a program? And so the whole afternoon is just a beautiful day. Snow everywhere. The sun's out. Go through everything. Here's how you teach it. Here's how you want to set yourself up. Here's the pace, all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the day, we were talking about, and anything else. I said, yeah, it's all about teaching. It's not about the stuff. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, well, look down at my feet. And so everybody looks down and someone goes, you don't have any skis on. I said, no, do you realize I never skied at all today? And all of a sudden
Mm.
it was like, they're like, oh,
And you'd
how
gone
did,
through the
kind of
whole
like, how did
session?
we miss this in the picture? I said, I was in a car accident last night. I said, I can barely walk right now. I said, I'm going to chiropractic tomorrow, Um, I said, I taught you, about skiing without putting skis on. So it's really about, having that knowledge about what is it you're teaching,
Hmm.
and what do you want to get across to all these students? And I said, see, I didn't even put on skis, and here I am teaching you about skiing, and you're all sitting there going, I'm ready come Monday, and I know how to do this. I said, so,
Right.
really think about, what is it, really understanding the content that you're going to teach, which is why I could, I kind of would joke at conferences sometimes and go, hey, I'm just the lounge singer up here. What do you want to hear? Kind of thing. Kind of like the Dan and Mo show. It's like, oh yeah, we got a million of them. What do you want to hear next? And part of that is not being afraid to be caught with something didn't work. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, well, guess what? Here's a pretty good example of something didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't put on skis, and what are you going to do now? I got to teach a whole day of how to teach skiing, and so
Right.
um,
Right.
it's that it's about them and not worrying about the appearances, about you, about, well, what if I can't get this to work? Well, it's going to happen to everybody every now and then. Sometimes your
Mm-hmm.
computer, I remember standing in front of a conference, and all of a sudden I hear, ooh, and I'm thinking, oh, they're all excited about what I'm doing. And someone points up and goes, oh, look at your screen. And I look up, and it was like the blue screen of death on the computer, where it's
Oh
just a
no.
crash. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to get interesting. But you just continue on. And so it's that, don't be afraid to try,
Mm-hmm.
and just simply accept that things aren't going to always work the way that you want it to. It's that
Right.
you put a lesson plan together, and you do it today, and you think, I just invented sliced bread.
Right.
And then you try it, with another class tomorrow, and it's a disaster. And you're like, it's like, well, we learned from it. What happened? What was
Right.
the reason? Why did it work well? All those little things. And so,
And you're not going to throw the whole thing away. You're going
yeah.
to
And
look critically at all the pieces and
mhm.
yeah.
One of the
So,
things I'm really trying to push for is we need to get away from that. I'm coming for, just hand me the tablets, the what are the steps? And I'm here, and I'm like, wait a minute, what's next? What's next? Type of thing,
mhm.
as opposed to look at what I'm doing here and think about how I'm doing this, because it's going to be different tomorrow. It's going to be different a half year from now. Look at the how. The steps aren't important. Steps are going to change. what is it we're actually trying to do? That's what
Hmm.
you really need to start to think about. He's using text to speech to do it. He's using, how is he using the switch? So, oh, like the concept of keyboard commands. When the Chromebooks first came out, people were like, oh, Chromebooks, oh, not switch accessible. You can't use a switch on
Right.
a Chromebook. And I'm like, what? It's like all I did was I went into some of the apps and stuff. I'm like, oh no, I can use switch access on this. And so they said, yeah, but there's no, you can't install software on it. I said, yeah, I don't need to. And so I pulled out, like, said, here, look at this. It was the Don Johnston's, Switch Interface Pro. I said, doesn't need any software. Plug it in. And they're like, can you, here's the funny moment. Can you plug it in? It's like, let's see, because how many people would be like, can I plug it in? It's like, did you try it?
Yeah.
Kind of like,
Like it's
like,
a little scary.
what do you think I did? It's like,
Hmm.
plug it in. If it goes and it reboots, it's like, I'm not going to do that again, but
Right.
I guarantee you, I'm going to try it first. So you plug it in and you go, oh, look at this. So your choice is to, I don't know, and what happens? We got Chromebooks and the kids not doing anything, or once again, plug it in and try it. And suddenly the concept of keyboard commands means I can go online to Tar Heel Reader. They can go through all the library and open up their own books. I can go to here and they can do it all from a Chromebook.
Right.
Oh, look at there's an on-screen keyboard. Does it work? Why don't you try it? It's
Right.
like, oh, try it. And so pull it up. Oh, look at this. You can scan with it, and suddenly it's like, that means we can use this switch and we can access this app. And you need to kind of like look at that, the overarching concepts of what we're doing here instead of that, oh, wait a minute, slow down. What's the next
Right.
step? It's like, that'll become a little more logical if you have the confidence to just give it a try, because sometimes you're going to skip 10 steps. It's like, oh, I don't need I open it up. He knows how to do this,
Right.
just put
Right.
it in front of it, so
I mean, it seems like that's where people get hung up. I don't know. And what you're saying is, I don't know. Let's try it. I mean, literally, it's just the how do you follow up with the I don't know? And so many of the leaders and change makers in the field so far have been like, and we didn't know what we were doing, but anyways, we started the program. I mean, and we didn't really know how to do it, so we just started trying, and we didn't really, nobody had ever done it before, so then we tried it. I mean, don't you think, Sarah? Like, it's just one
Yeah.
of these things where it's like, one of the things that I feel like is almost a system, and I don't know, and I don't know if you want to speak to this today or not, but I think there's some generational components to this too. Is just not wanting to fail, needing to be good at something right away, and you can't be good. I mean, I was in AAC when the iPads came out, and people are like, "How does that work?" I'm like, I don't know. I mean,
Right.
literally, this is the first day with the iPad with an AAC app, and
yeah.
I don't know, let's figure that out, right?
And there's a lot of pressure because there is so much we do know. There's so much technology and so much changing. So I think we should know this by now, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're waiting for someone else to teach us. It's like, what are
Hmm.
you going to do between now and then? Like I go to a conference in the fall. What are you going to do till next fall?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the
I
learning
always
doesn't
say,
stop.
until the expert arrives, let me give it a try. I haven't
Yeah.
found her yet.
Yeah. Right. Right.
I'm
Dan,
looking at the I don't know if you remember the IntelliKeys keyboard. You can
mhm.
you
Yes,
could
and we miss it,
program
and
it.
there is not a replacement for it. So that's a bummer. That's a bummer thing about
Yeah.
technology too, is sometimes the really good stuff goes away.
So what most people are doing is using it for writing,
Yeah.
overlays for writing. But I'm looking at it going, oh, wait a minute, what do kids really want to do? It's like, so one day I'm sitting there thinking, like, all kids want to be a rock star.
Mhm.
So, oh, wait a minute, I can make buttons on here, and the buttons don't have to be square. Why can't they be the whole length of the keyboard?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking guitar strings. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I made the IntelliGuitar. So I'm at a conference and I turned to, I had done some things with the keyboard. And so I turned my back I Velcroed on a guitar neck made out of just foam board. They slide in the overlay. It looks like a guitar. And I launched the activity for it. And I put on these wraparound sunglasses, and I jump up on top of the table, and I go, "It's time to rock out." Everybody's like, like, "Wait a minute, it's an IntelliKeys keyboard." And I go, "All kids want to be a rock star." And I go, "Oh, first I need to tune it." And so here I am, I'm touching the keyboard, and I'm, my hands on this piece of foam board, and I literally drew it so you could tell this is kind of like, yeah, spaghetti strings all over. And I'm like touching it and going ding 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 ding, and then people I'm like, "Hey, it's
I
time
hope
to
you
rock
had.
out." And so I just touched a pre-programmed button on the overlay, and it starts playing this, Jimi Hendrix type thing, and I go, we need to look at things differently. We need to think
Mm,
about what the kids want to do. I said they could be writing during class time, but free time, you know what? They want to rock out.
yeah,
And
I
it's
love
kind of
that.
pushing the idea of look what we have and what can we do with it, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
extending. And but that, once again, that's all the kids want to be like everybody else. And so here's a way to do it. And
Right.
instead of like, "Oh, we need to get something," it's like, look at what we have and look at what it does. And it's that whole being kind of like never growing up, staying in that kind of like kids, like
Hmm.
exploring and really kind of looking at what this is. I guess it comes down to sometimes this is what we were told it does, and then I'm going to take it and pick it up and go. It's like it's
Right.
not supposed to do that. Oh, sorry. It's kind
Right.
of like,
Right.
that. Yeah, go ahead and explore.
So we'll
Because
be looking for your videos on YouTube of your Rockstar videos. I'd like to see video of that one.
yes.
Well, go ahead, Brenda.
I feel like there's so many facets to you because I know as a practitioner being in your class and getting all the ideas. And then I also know a different side of you.
Oh
At
no.
re- well, okay. I also know in my professional experience also experienced you as a mentor. And I experienced that through writing my book. And one thing that I liked about that was the way that you very much honor the individual that's coming in, meaning you aren't trying to create a whole bunch of mini Dans. You aren't trying to create a whole bunch of people that see things necessarily exactly the same way you see it, but you're wanting people to think for a minute, how are you looking at this? Is there a way for you to change the way you're looking at this? Not necessarily to think like Dan, but to maximize your strengths in thinking.
Yeah, I think people forget that about mentoring, really. I think a lot of people think mentoring is what we would really should call training. I'm going to train you how
Mm-hmm.
to do something. That's training.
Mhm.
Mentoring is kind of looking
Mm-hmm.
at you and going, what are your goals? What are your dreams? Where do you want to go? And what can I bring to you that will allow you to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so mentoring is about what is your time frame? What is your pursuits? What can I bring and show you to build your confidence, to help kind of maybe sometimes get you to focus on something, whether it's here, I want you to read this and let's think about how it applies to what you're doing right now. Let's talk about this. What are you doing and what's going to take you from here to there? What do you think it needs? And it's bringing in that kind of I'm the outside perspective, so it's about you, but this is what I'm seeing. And that kind of, it's really a relationship. It's kind of, instead of I'm sitting up here telling you what this is what you need to do, it's
Mm-hmm.
no, we're kind of walking side by side going, yeah, what do you think? Well, I'm trying, yeah,
Mhm.
what if you tried this? What do you think the outcomes? Well, so this is what I'm seeing. Well, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think it's like you said, Brenda, it's that I'm going to make you a mini me. I'm going to do a
Mm-hmm.
brain dump. Here's how I do it. Here's my
Hmm.
agendas. Here's how you replicate it. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
where are you in there?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
it's never about me. And that whenever I try to work, whenever I work with people and try to instill in them, it's about you. I'm already me. I'm happy with me and my life, the directions I'm going. So this is about you and for you to feel the same empowerment. Um, I
But I,
remember when I was young, I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail,
Wow.
2,650 miles end to end. And it was way back in the days, only a handful of people had ever done it at that point. And I'd planned a long time for it. All the planning, get the maps, the equipment. Yeah, I was 20 years old when I set out to do it. And so when I got to the end, and I reached the end of the trail, and you're at the border crossing and at the fence, and it's like, and you kind of look back at every single step, and it's like, oh my God, the feeling that comes over you, because it was 6 months,
Wow.
across the desert, sometimes 10, 15 days between resupplying and
Oh,
stuff like
can't
that.
imagine.
And so, and you can look at like let's say the National Geographic pictures and go, oh, it must have been wonderful. It's like, yeah, people get that idea. It's not like camping where we drive to a campsite, we take out the pop-up tent, the Coleman
Hmm.
stove. No, there's a lot of days of walking in the rain. There's a lot of days where it's 5 below and you're cold. There's a lot of days where it's really kind of miserable, and you just got to get up and do it. And you get your miles in. Otherwise, you just never get to the end and finish your goals. And so I never forget the feeling. It's really what has driven my life, I think. That feeling of, oh my God, I can do anything. I can do
Hmm.
anything that I set my, sights on. And all it takes is, direction, hard work, put into planning, but I can do it. And I want to bring this feeling to everybody else.
mm,
And
Love that.
so it
mm,
doesn't matter whether it's working with adults, it doesn't matter to me whether it's working with kids.
Hmm.
Back then I was teaching a wilderness program for at-risk kids, and then I'm working in the computer lab,
Hmm.
at another school of, how can we use technology, to really engage these kids. And then it was doing professional development and working with adults and trying to inspire them, to look at it that I want to inspire you, so you turn around and inspire the kids. And so
Right.
it's that feeling, that lifelong feeling of, oh my God, this, I want everybody to feel this. I want you to know what it's like to kind of like, I reached the mountaintop, so to speak, and I've looked around and gone, oh yeah, oh yeah. And
Hmm.
I know for me after that it was, I don't need to get to the top anymore. I'm going to teach you how to do it. I want you to
Oh,
experience this.
did he
And
cut out for
really
you, Brenda?
that's kind of like what I'm doing now.
so the thing is I think that as professionals is in the schools especially, but even in private sector, like you're just, if you have 40, 50, 60 hour a week work weeks and you're doing all these other things, it's almost like I remember when you were asking these questions, like where do you want to go? What's your goal? It's like, what do you mean? I just want to finish today. I just want to finish. I just got to get through my IEPs. Like what, I also think what a mentor does is goes, hold on, you can stay on the hamster wheel, but you could also just get off for a second and go, where do you actually want to go? And I think that's one of the things I think that you do really well is you ask the questions that make people, because I think I would have continued on the same track in lots of different directions, not even realizing that is choosing a track. And so
Mm.
it's like if you want to help people get somewhere, and they have to be aware that they have choices about where they want to go and how they want to get there. And even 7 habits of highly effective people, it's like, what's one thing you could change that would make a big difference? I've been asking people that too in the profession, and they're like, I don't I don't know. I'm like, okay, get back to me. Like literally, I want you to think about it. What is
Hmm.
one thing? because that becomes the one thing that you begin to, that's the one thing I want to help you with. What's hard? What's the one thing that if you could change, it would make the biggest impact in your stress level, or in your effectiveness with your students, or in your communication with parents, or, there's so many areas you can look at. And I think that you do a good job of that. As we begin to prepare for the Mentor's Guide book study through Special Ed Tech Center, Dan and I were going through the book, and they do such a nice job of talking about asking questions, not only of your mentee, but of yourself as a mentor. What are your assumptions? How do you look at things? And it makes you stop and go, it feels like I don't have time to think about big dreams. But the reality is that when you stop and you think about where do you want to go, that is the only way that you effectively use your time to create change.
Yeah, it's like that. Stephen Covey, I think it's I'm positive it's him. He has this video. You can go to YouTube and see it, where he's got these big rocks and then these smaller rocks, and it's like
Right.
the task is, okay, you got to get all these rocks to fit in this glass jar, and people will take all the small rocks, dump them in, then they try to get the big rocks and they don't fit, and it's like, well, see, they don't fit. And the big rocks are supposed to be the important things you need to get done, and the small rocks are all the little details that take up a lot of our time. And then he reversed it. He said, these are the important things. Let's put these in. This is what we make time for. And then you dump in all the small ones, and it filters in and around, and everything fits.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's that idea that we are always thinking, I don't have time for this. I can't. Well, yeah, you're right. If you continue to do it the way you are, you won't have time for it. Here's a different way. And it's that whole, like you were talking about, Brenda. Well, even getting your book, writing your book and getting it done, and, getting it out there. It's like, this is the goal. This is where we are right now. Every day is like another day on the trail. And some days are kind of like, oh my God, I had a hard day. But you keep on, you stick to it, and eventually look where you are. And the funny thing is, you do that, you get through the process. How did it feel when you finally got your book done and it went on to the editor and then on to be published? It must have, did it feel like, woo, guess what? Now it's kind of like, now that I'm done, but you learn a lot from that process. That's for sure.
Well, even that, I remember when I met you, I was like, no, I'm not writing a book. I mean, I'm writing down my ideas. I'm not an author. I don't write a book. I mean, even you had.
And I remember saying to you, oh, you're writing this book.
Yeah, you had the goal before I did. But again, that some of that is just confidence, right? It's like talking to people about, you can actually do this. This is not a job for other people. This is not a job for the people that know this better, who do this, who have been doing this longer, who don't have dyslexia, right? This is not a job for smarter people. Like, this is actually something that you should do, And I think there's a lot of people who also just lack the confidence, and I think you do a nice job of going, well, let's go ahead anyways. Yep, let's just keep going anyways. You know what I mean? Because
I'm so glad you brought up the Mentor's Guide book study, Brenda, because you and Dan are going to be excellent facilitators for this. I'm excited to keep this conversation going and have that mentorship piece of it. But I'm going to ask a question before we wrap up with Dan today, because Dan, you have been at conference after conference. You said, I'm going to one conference and I'm planning for the next. But then we haven't seen you. What's going on? What are you doing?
If anybody that's read Atlas Shrugged, I kind of pulled a John Galt. It's like, all of a sudden he was gone. And so I started thinking over the years, it's easy to, in a sense, kind of like fill a room with people. You've got some interesting topics and stuff. You've got these people, and they'll come, and and then they're coming back again, kind of like for the next step. And I was always looking at it as, I want you to get here, not here. And so I started looking at how we do professional development, and I started looking at I was hoping to see, the bar being raised higher in our field and, things progressing further and people being a little more empowered and stuff. And I started thinking, maybe it's us, maybe
Mm,
it's not them. Maybe it's how we're delivering professional development. Maybe we need to make changes to that,
mm,
and so I decided to drop out and to actually go back and do some research on it. And so now I'm finishing up a master's on, because my project's going to be, reimagining professional development. And so,
mm,
I'm looking at things like how do we infuse critical thinking into the sessions we do? How do we integrate critical reflection, getting people to really reflect on what is it we're doing? Why are we doing this? What's holding me back from doing this? And also self-assessment and to get them to be more engaged in their own learning instead of
right,
that kind of, okay, you're the expert and I'm here to learn. It's like, no, we're
right,
going to learn together. You need to have a little more confidence in yourself. And so
right,
um, I want you to see what is it you need to do to take, to be more of an engaged part of your own learning. And so I'm really looking at professional development, even things like, we talk about cultural competency now. And I was reading something the other day about critical thinking in different cultures and how in the United States we look at critical thinking from a more of I'll use the word dynamic approach, and yet other cultures it's like don't question the teacher, they're the sage, they're
mm-hmm,
transmitting knowledge to you, don't question it. And it's like, well, that's in conflict with the way we approach it here.
mm-hmm,
But then we need to look at that and go, kind of like what I did, well, maybe it's us. Maybe we need to look at it a different way altogether. So it's not like you need to do it the way I'm doing it, and or necessarily the way you're doing it isn't working either. We need to find that happy medium, and that's kind of really looking at that cultural competency of how do I make all this work with look at the different cultures that are coming into our society now and into
right.
education, into teaching, and all this kind of stuff. And so really looking at redesigning and taking kind of like, for example, here's a 1 hour session that I used to do. How can I really change that? How can people learn pretty much the same thing in a different way and go back and
Mm,
feeling a little more empowered instead of the, where's the list? Kind of like, I get this, maybe teaching a little more the concept behind what we're teaching,
mm-hmm,
get them to think critically during the session, having
mm-hmm,
having a place in the session where they're doing that instead of that whole PowerPoint transmission of knowledge where
right,
I'm just clicking and going through, and you're just kind of like going through the slides, going, I got the handout, and it becomes kind of like a stream of, I'm going to try to get everything in within this
right,
hour. And then you go
right,
away and you've got to process it. No, it doesn't work like that. And it doesn't work because we don't learn in a vacuum either. We need to look and go, I don't know. What do you think, Brenda? What do you think, Sarah?
mm-hmm,
And for you to be able to go, "Oh, wait a minute, I don't get what you're doing, Did it doesn't make any sense to me." And for me to go, oh, you're right, and so, if we learn in isolation, we take the handout and go back on our own without any discussion, we run into problems and
right,
we run into walls as opposed to learning from each other and learning from each other. Kind of like, we're in this, we need to think about this, we need to actively do it, we need to have things built in where, I gotta turn to you and go like, wait a minute, well, what are you doing with this? I didn't think we could
right,
do that. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, now I get it. Let's continue, type
right.
of thing. And so,
And that makes it stick, right? And like, God forbid you lose your handout on the way
yeah,
home.
exactly.
But
I want you to walk away and go, I don't need the handout, so to speak. I really get the big picture.
sure,
And so I left really to look at how can we redesign differently, look at the kind of learners we have in our audience, why are some just sitting there waiting for, you're talking, and all they're waiting for is, okay, but what's the next thing we do, kind of thing. Like, well, if you're waiting for the next thing we do here, you're not going to be able to apply it. You're really just kind of following the steps, like that lower level of blooms, in a sense of following the steps versus, analyzing and synthesizing and applying it into even different situations. And so,
Hmm.
so it's kind of exciting, kind of interesting, and
It's
I will
important
be
work.
back with some fairly different ideas on some of the things we can do to let's call it re-energizing. Because one of the things I'm starting to see for the trends is, look how much of our learning now is online
Right.
as opposed to in person. So we can't just say this is the way I did it in person, so just replicate it online. It's like we have totally different tools. We have the ability
Hmm.
to now integrate all these other things that can be done, and we need to imagine that differently too.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Especially if it becomes those self-running modules where I'm going to do it on my time when I have time, and I'm not going to finish it all in one sitting. I need to.
Right.
So what does that look like, and what keeps the person engaged, and what keeps learning moving forward,
Hmm.
instead of kind of like I watch the movie. I watch a PowerPoint, an hour long PowerPoint taking notes. Like, why do I need to do that? So
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
Well, we look forward to learning more about that from you.
Yes,
And
it's been so, so fun, as you've passed on little tidbits of read this and look at how different generations, that was so fascinating to me. Look at how different generations process information and what they expect of themselves and others. And I mean, it's just been such an interesting thing to just hear little bits about. So I'm excited to learn more. And I also think too, we know get sit and get doesn't really do it because it's not a relationship over time. And that's
mhm.
that's a question now. I mean, people want learning on demand and they want it in their own time frame, but it's still in isolation. And so how do we create communities, even if it is online, how do we create communities so that it's not in isolation? Because we know that we learn more when we can talk about it, or we hear others talk about it, or when we can feel like we're part of a community. So um, I'm interested to see how the field evolves in this continuing education way, because I think that it's critical that it moves forward, frankly, with the technology that is now available. And I think COVID brought that to light too. It's like, so I think this is a key part in moving forward, is making sure that we are delivering information in a way that it can easily be applied, synthesized, and taken to their own level.
Yeah. And I think it's going
hmm.
to look different. I think we need to let go of, it needs to kind of like small step look like it did before.
Hmm.
If you go and read anything by Joel Barker and paradigms and paradigm shifts, and he
Hmm.
talks about, really when we're going to shift the field type of thing, and it's really read outside your field, look at ideas of what's going on outside
Hmm.
there, and then bring
Yeah.
them back in. And
Hmm.
he's a big proponent of, that's where change comes from. It doesn't
Hmm.
come from within. We tend to, like, we're walking down this narrow corridor. He goes, change comes from without, someone looking out on the outside going like, hey, did you ever think of? And it's like, whoa, and so
Hmm.
I think we need to think differently, and I think we need
Hmm.
to be, approach it differently. So
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for continuing to stretch us on that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining us today. It's
all
Yes.
been
right.
such a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Aaron. Thanks, Brenda.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for your contribution to the field. And we can't wait for your next installment to that.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.